Chess is easy once you play this opening. This is the simplest opening under 2000 and you don't need anything else. Here is how it works. You start with the move d6. You don't care what your opponent is doing. Literally against everything. d4, e4, c4, knight f3. You don't care. The next move you play knight to f6. You immediately attack the opponent e4 and normally they play knight to c3. By the way, if they play e5, this is already a horrible mistake. You take the queen, then you play knight g4, and you at least win a pawn with a winning position. Okay, knight c3. Now you play e5. This is the starting position of the Philidor defense, my favorite opening that I play for 10 years, and with absolutely successful results. And I'm gonna show you in this video exactly how I do that. Now, white has a choice whether he plays knight to f3 or he takes immediately. So the first advantage of this opening is that you don't need to memorize a lot of lines. Basically, you only need to know 7 moves. And you play it against everything. Like the main drawback of some openings like Sicilian defense, which I also play, you have to memorize so much stuff, and I still struggle with it. But here, you basically don't need to memorize anything. You play d6, you play knight f6 against everything. You play e5 whenever you can. I mean, if they start with knight f3, then you might not be able to play it immediately. So you play knight d7 first, but then you still play a5. Then you still play knight d7, you play bishop e7, castles, and the key move that I really want you to remember, this move c6. It is against this knight that I has no opportunities, and then all you need to do is just understand your plan. Not memorize, but understand the key idea, which is either to play here on the queen side, a very typical one, or whenever you have an opportunity to play d5, you can do that. That would be fantastic. Okay, my opponent thought here for a long time and he played knight f3. By the way, this is the second huge advantage of this opening. You, as black, this is the only thing you play, so you know what to do. You don't spend any time on the first moves, and especially in the rabbit chess and the blitz chess, it's such a huge advantage. You can immediately automatically make your first 10-15 moves once you start to play, and you have a little bit of a feel on how you do that, and you have more time for the middle game and the end game when it really matters, and your opponent immediately feels pressure on himself, like, yeah, black is playing so fast, so solid, what am I gonna do? I don't have that much experience. This is the third advantage you have, because you're gonna play it every single time, and so your opponent only sees it once out of 100 at least, because only one player out of 1,000 plays this exact position, the Philidor opening with the move e5 on move 3. And so you have a huge advantage. Castles, yeah, we can also castle here, and we follow our plan. Remember, I have told you this is literally the only 7 moves you need to know, and this is exactly what I'm doing here against whatever my opponent is playing. And so, yeah, you have a lot more experience. Once that becomes what you play in every single one of your game, against any opponent, you just have huge advantage in terms of understanding the position more. What kind of ideas are working here versus what kind of ideas are stupid. Where to put your pieces. You have so much more understanding once you play it on a regular basis. Okay, I have completed my 7 moves. This is everything you need to memorize, and then, as I mentioned before, you have 2 ideas that is important to understand. Either to play b5, that is why my opponent is playing a4 just to stop me from that, or playing in the center. That's what I'm gonna do. And now we kind of enter the middle game. In the middle game, it's important always and always to pay attention to what your opponent is doing. And so he plays a4 here, he wants to go forward with a5, so all we want to do is to stop him, so we play a5 and block that opportunity. I struggled so much before I have started to play this opening, like 10 years ago, against e4, I just didn't know what to do. I've played the Sicilian, but like so many theoretical variations, it's so difficult to memorize everything. But then somehow I came across this opening, and I'm like, I can play this exact thing against everyone. I understand the position pretty good because I know the ideas, and this is just fantastic for me. I don't need to learn, like, this memorization thing is the worst thing that is there in chess for me personally. And if you don't have a lot of time, if you're under 2000 ELO especially, this would be perfect. This would make chess easy for you kind of immediately once you start playing it and understand the first ideas. Of course, you can always go deeper into it. I have created an entire opening course based on this opening for Black, 10-day opening mastery. Feel free to take a look at it. The link would be in the description. But I just want to illustrate you the normal plan. Okay, he plays bishop f1, which is one of the most reasonable moves. I mean, they usually go for h3 and bishop e3, but you can never go wrong with it. Although, if you are low rated, it's not clear for you this bishop was great. Why on earth would it go back voluntarily? But yeah, just sometimes it's tough. That gives us additional opportunities because now, as we don't have any pressure here, we can just put our rook to e8 square and prepare for some action in the center. As we were not allowed to play on the queen side, you remember that was one of our ideas, then we are going to go for the second one. The second one is to play in the center. d5 is always, if you're able to play it, of course you should. In this case, it's difficult because first he can take there, and then he attacks our e5 pawn a lot. Another idea we have here is to take on d4 and place our knight on c5. That would be great. I mean, the knight on c5 and the fielder defense, in most of the cases, it appears to be there, and it's a really fantastic piece. Our main advantage, or rather our opponent's main disadvantage, which often is the same thing, this knight on c3. It has literally zero prospects, all thanks to this move c6. That is why I ask you to remember this move forever. You never ever play c5 unless somehow this knight is not there, because then you're gonna get into trouble. It's gonna get good squares to go. But with the pawn on c6, you have nothing to worry about. All right. Well, the reason why we were able to play rook e8 is because he removed his bishop, because otherwise he would be able to play knight g5. So yeah, of course, you take a look at what your opponent's opportunities are, not to get into trouble. But here I guess I can just remove my bishop so that my rook is active, and at some point I want just to place my knight on c5 and create pressure against the e4 pawn. It will be specifically great against the move bishop e3, which is what they normally play here. If they do go for bishop g5, first of all, it's not a big problem, and secondly, I can just play queen to b6, putting additional pressure here as well as here, and getting rid of that pin. Thanks to the fact that my rook is protecting the pawn on e5, I'm not scared of bishop takes, knight takes. Yes, he goes for it. Obviously, I can also start with the move h6. Just asking a question, do you take here? Although, that would be even a little bit interesting for him. If he takes and I take back with a knight, he takes, then exchanges the queens, and all of a sudden this e5 pawn is hanging in the end of the day. Like, it's not necessary for me. I don't even want to calculate those complicated lines. I have a very reasonable move. Just remember that queen is pretty good in the fielder defense on b6 if, obviously, you don't have this bishop on e3. He can still go back to e3, but I can also step back to c7, and I need at least for a second calculate what's going to happen if I take that b2 pawn. Of course, it's dangerous, and you can only do it if you're sure you're not going to lose your queen, but there is nothing stopping me from thinking about it. Okay, he goes for queen d2, which is similar. Well, now I don't have this opportunity to take anyway, because the knight is protected, and rook b1 would just win my queen. But we don't do that. We don't go crazy. We have a very reasonable plan to attack in the center, and to achieve that, we normally take on d4 and play knight to c5. In this case, though, the problem is he's attacking here. So how do we go about it? Maybe we play h6, and after bishop h4, we have another idea to play knight h5. Specifically for a reason that he played queen d2, so his queen is not active. So you see, depending on what your opponent is doing, you think about your opportunities as well. The main thing, though, is that you are always trying to be as active as possible, and whenever your opponent is making a move, it's actually the best rule to help you get to 2000 ELO, no matter which opening you play. Every single time he makes a move, try to understand what changes in the position, what kind of an idea he has, and is it dangerous for you? h6, I can always play it. There is no sacrifice because I have my bishop here. If he takes, it's also never a problem for me. I'm gonna just take it back and enjoy my bishop's advantage. So well, yeah, he has two choices. He can step back here or here. Yes. Now, of course, that is a huge threat. The queen can step back to Well, queen to b4 is actually also a reasonable idea, which often is the case in the Philidor, especially when sometimes you take on d4 and queen takes, and then you place your queen on b4, trying to exchange it. In this particular case, probably he's gonna play rook a3 and my queen again would be in trouble. We don't play anything fancy. We just have our queen on c7. Very often you want to place your queen on c7, especially when there is a bishop on a3, so you cannot go to b6. Because here the queen is very stable, it protects the e5 pawn, the d6 pawn. You want to take and play knight to c5 now, and then you have the road free for your rook to be developed as well. Alright, so my main idea now is basically no matter what he does, takes and knight c5. This is a very cool idea to free up a little bit, because you don't want to have some space problems. You want to attack, you want to be active. And that would help me to finish my development. Sometimes another idea is to play b6 and then develop the bishop this way, either to a6 or to b7. But I like this plan with if e takes d, knight c5 more, just to give you more examples what kind of ideas you can have in the Philidor defense. Yeah, b6 is also one of them. Okay, he actually goes for that, which is interesting. But I think I can just take. I don't see anything wrong. Normally the knight takes, and now he doesn't have that luxury. I assume again he wants to take here and stop my move knight c5 because he has bishop f6. That is smart. That is smart, but maybe I can just play g6 now. Why not? And then play bishop g7. My bishop would be great, and knight c5 would be possible. I should be a little bit careful with that pawn on d6. He can do that, but he has his bishop. Whenever he goes away, the e4 pawn will be also hanging. And if he takes here, well, I'm gonna have my chances too. So let me play g6. Now that he is gone with his bishop, the h6 pawn is not hanging. So you see, in the middle game, you always, basically, you want to make moves either to continue your strategic idea, which in my case is knight c5, and I'm constantly looking for ways to make it possible, or you do something to stop your opponent's idea. And a move here is a perfect example for that, because he has created a threat. So you don't want to just blindly make your move without thinking what your opponent can do. For example, I wanted to play bishop g7, but if I'm not looking at my opponent's threats, I'm going to lose, because he's going to play knight g6 thanks to this spin. Have to be careful with that. I have the move knight e5 with the tempo, which I kind of like, and this bishop would need to go away, and then I can continue with bishop e6. I actually like it a lot. Yes, he's gonna have f4 at some point, but then I have already developed my bishop. I'm gonna attack his bishop, and that would help me to finish my development. Let's do that. Ah, wait, I have to calculate the most obvious line. If he takes, and then he takes on g6, actually that wouldn't work for me. All right, that means that I probably need to step back with the king. Which is also not that simple, because he's attacking that pawn. So basically it means I should go here, which is not desirable for me. I wanted to put my bishop. Yeah, I have to admit this bishop c4 move is very good. So do I really sacrifice the pawn? Do I have any good moves afterwards? Takes. If I take with the rook, he takes. Have rook g5 here, suddenly. By the way, it's also threatening to play bishop takes bishop takes h3. Wow. Remember, I'm gonna have a bishop's advantage there. But he has still knight to f4, defending the pawn and getting away from the trouble. Can I continue somehow from there? Creating threats for him, like d5 or something? Yeah, I probably don't have enough. Although, I'm gonna play d5, he's gonna take, I'm gonna have bishop d6. Somehow all of my pieces spring to life. I'm gonna have a lot of initiative here. I like it. It's a very natural thing in chess. Let's go for it. Let's see. I mean, if I lose, I lose. That's okay. It's, by the way, it's always better to play actively in chess, because even if you lose, you learn a lot in the process. But, of course, if you're playing actively, you have many more chances. If you are just standing like that, like a boxer, waiting for your opponent to come and destroy you, it's not the right strategy. Eventually, he's going to come and you're going to regret the day you were born. But Here I want to get my counterplay. Like normally you would always want to take back with the pawn, but specifically for a reason that he takes here and he creates some threats, I want to take with the rook because strangely enough, that would allow me to create more threats. Let me just check. If he takes, I can play bishop c5. No, this h6 pawn is hanging. I should take with the rook. Yes, he plays that. My rook is hanging. He can take on f6, on f8, the bishop. That is something I haven't mentioned before. But I'm not obliged to take it immediately. I can't actually play bishop h3 because this knight has no way to be saved, right? It has no squares at all. And I'm creating a threat there, and then, yeah, I would be able to take the knight somehow back. Let's see what he does. I don't feel that, yeah, maybe knight takes f8 is an interesting opportunity. He goes for it, but now I want to take. Okay, let me check the most forcing moves. You always and always want to check what your opponent can do. He can take here, sacrificing his queen, but I don't think it's going to be enough. And otherwise, I'm threatening there, bishop takes g2. If he plays bishop is knight to e6, sorry, I always have an opportunity just to take it back with the bishop, or maybe even take it back with the pawn because I still want to attack. f4 is never a problem. I have rook takes g2 check, winning the queen. Otherwise, I don't really see how exactly he wants to create threats for me. He does nothing, I want just to take this knight back. Maybe queen f4. But I do have knight h5, right? I'm attacking the queen, the f7 pawn is still protected. So knight h5 seems to be reasonable. Queen f3, I'm gonna take it here, and my rook on g5 suddenly is pretty good. I mean, at some point he can play f4, but first it's not that simple. Secondly, it weakens his king even more, so I might have some additional opportunities. Okay, he goes for queen f4. He's attacking my knight. I cannot just ignore it. Again, the golden rule, whenever your opponent makes a move, stop thinking about all of the ideas you had and think about this move, why he has done it, what kind of an idea he has here. I think knight h5 is the best for me. This is the most active. You always want to start with the most active response. How you can attack. He cannot take on f7. I'm going to just take it back, and this knight is still in trouble. Otherwise, maybe queen h4 is his idea, but I don't see what's stopping me from playing. Wait, maybe that is the idea. Queen h4, bishop takes g2, and f4. That makes some sense. If I play rook takes g2, maybe I'm just winning there. Because, no, my main bishop is hanging. I should be a little bit careful with that. Like king f1, of course, I'm not in trouble. I'm going to have all sorts of discover checks. But king h1, and then my bishop is hanging. Otherwise, I wanted to play d5 and just threaten checkmate there in one move. But he plays queen takes h3, threatening my rook. Okay, queen h4 seems to be the move. Maybe I just play bishop takes g2 though. f4, I can step back. And if he takes, I have bishop f3 discover check. I understand that might be too difficult for you, but the main point is here, I'm trying to be as active as possible. You see that with every single one of my moves, I try to create a new threat. So Pillar defense is not an opening where you're supposed to stay there passive the whole game. Whenever you have your chances, you are going for it. You want to play actively. That's my philosophy for my entire chess life. I don't want to stay there and wait for my opponent to come and crush me. I want to be in the driver's seat, and that's what I'm trying to do. Of course, as black, it's always much more difficult because white has an extra tempo, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. Okay, what stops me from taking? Actually, f4, remember I mentioned that queen to b6 check. I do think it might be, no, he controls that square. Okay, let me check the safest option. f4, and I just step back. He cannot take because of bishop f3, otherwise I threaten with a lot of discover checks, and I also win a lot of pawns in the process. It cannot be bad for me. Rook takes I don't like because somehow a lot of my pieces are hanging, the knight, the bishop. Normally you want to have as few of your pieces hanging or vulnerable or miserable as possible. Okay, now I feel like he has to play a4, otherwise he's kind of losing immediately. I mean, I'm threatening to take, or just take back here, don't have any problems at all. Yes, so he does go for it, and now the question is, do I need this check or do I just step back? The drawback of the check is that the king will not be on the g file anymore, and I feel like I don't need to go for it. Instead, like rook g3 is possible, but again, I don't want my pieces to be vulnerable. I just want to step back, and now he cannot take because of this discover check that I have mentioned before. Otherwise, yeah, now queen b6 might be interesting in some variations. Obviously, those discover checks from the bishop and d5 move. Remember, I have mentioned that d5 is the move that you always want to make in the ACCELERATOR. Yes, in most of the cases, especially early on in the game, you cannot do that. But once it becomes a possibility, that might be just your winning move. Like here, d5. I'm threatening to win the bishop. If he takes, I have knight f4. If he takes the knight, well, my queen is opened up, and I can play queen takes f4, and that is, yeah, checkmate immediately. Like, I have too many attacking pieces. If he plays e5, maybe that's the only way to somehow save himself. But at least I can grab a lot of material there. Maybe I even have something like knight to g3, knight f5, stuff like that. I mean, whenever I can play d5 and I can get away with it, I just should go for it. Yes, because to say the least, this bishop is now useless on this diagonal. Now I can just play bishop f3. By the way, bishop f3 is huge. Creates a threat of rook g2 check, and the king almost has no squares to go. And I just protect this bishop, and I still attack this guy. Let me go for it. I feel like I'm completely winning. Probably he wants to play that, right? That would be reasonable to save his bishop, but that means he's going back. He's on the defensive side, which is always great for me. I still need to be a little bit careful not to somehow blunder some of my pieces there, but I have tremendous advantage. There is no way I'm doing bad here. Okay, he plays that, which is dealing with the problem of rook g2 check. But what about this bishop? Can't I just take it? Because once he takes, I can actually just take it with the king. Yeah, let me take it. I'm not sure, though. Do I take with the knight or do I take with the king? I kind of like both moves. Because if I take with the knight, he at least can take here on h6. Somehow it feels a little bit dangerous. Although objectively, I'm still like a piece up in the end of the day, right? Because then this knight still cannot escape. Or I take with the king, but then maybe he plays queen f6 and like rook g1. It might be scary. Okay, let me take with the knight. I do feel like with an extra piece I should be able to deal with his threats, and if I do, I just win immediately because I have an extra piece. Yes, so rook g1 is coming. What about queen b6? Threatening queen f2? Maybe, yeah, no, he cannot do that. Queen h7, I mean, I just take. Yes, you can win my rook, but I'm gonna give you a checkmate. Okay, we are both on seconds, so anything can happen, but I still feel very optimistic. My bishop is controlling all of the squares this knight can go, and here I just wanted to create... Wait, knight f5 is just winning the queen. Yeah, okay. Well, that was a great game. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have seen how many... No, that's not necessary. How many opportunities you have. Okay, he's still trying to trick me somehow, but I have an extra queen, come on. Yeah, finally he resigns. How many great opportunities you have with this opening. If you want to know what to do if white does take here on e5 and exchange with the queen, this is a beautiful endgame as black, and here I show you exactly that, the perfect strategy to outplay everyone.